I never thought I'd be in this position, being accused of freeloading by my own mother-in-law. I'm 34, married to a wonderful man. 38, with 2 kids and a life I'm proud of. But everything changed when my husband's mom, a woman who prides herself on independence, decided to try and tear apart my life. It started small. At first, I ignored her comments. "You know, I don't know how you do it. Must be nice to stay home while your husband works so hard," she'd say, as if being a stay-at-home mom wasn't a full-time job. Then, when she thought I wasn't listening, the remarks became sharper. "You're living off his hard work," she'd whisper to him, though I could hear it all the way from the kitchen. I'd been a stay-at-home mom by choice, not by necessity. Before having kids, I had a solid career. But when we looked at daycare costs and the time it would take away from our family, we made the decision together. He had no problem with it. In fact, he appreciated everything I did to keep the house running. The kids, the meals, the shopping, the laundry, everything. That goes into running household while raising small children. But none of that mattered to her. She kept calling me a freeloader, despite the fact that our finances were shared. And he had never once complained. The comments grew more frequent, more biting. It was like she couldn't stand the idea that I was living off her. "Son," I'd roll my eyes and shake it off. But it stung. But then it took a dark turn. One evening, my husband came home from work looking worn out. He barely said a word, just sat down and sighed. I knew something was up. Finally, he admitted that his mother had called him. She'd spent hours convincing him that it wasn't fair that I stayed home while he worked and that I should be contributing financially. It wasn't just that she suggested that he start controlling my spending to teach me responsibility. My heart sank. I didn't know how to react. I was hurt. I had spent years building our family, making sure everything ran smoothly. And yet, there I was, being treated like a burden. But instead of confronting him or defending myself, I did something else. I smiled and told him I understood. I told him that, if he thought it was necessary, we could have a talk about our finances. He looked relieved, and for a moment, I almost wanted to laugh. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't going to end with her manipulating him into thinking I was lazy. The truth was, I knew something about my mother-in-law that would change everything, and I was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. A few days later, my husband brought up the idea of revisiting our finances. He was hesitant, almost guilty, and I could tell that his mom's words were still lingering in his head. It wasn't even about the money. It was about her manipulation. "Well, if you think it's important, I can consider contributing more financially," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I can take on a few bills or something." He was caught off guard by how easily I agreed. He seemed happy about it, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. This wasn't his idea. It was hers. He was just too worn down by her constant pressure. But I wasn't going to fight back just yet. I was playing the long game. For the next few days, Mill grew bolder. Almost gleeful that I was. Finally seeing sense, she started suggesting side hustles I could do from home. Freelance writing, tutoring, baking cakes, all things she thought would make me more useful. I humored her, agreeing with everything she said. She had no idea what was coming. The moment arrived during a visit to her house. We were having a typical conversation, and, as usual, Mill found a way to bring up the topic of finances. This time, she went further, suggesting that my husband should start controlling the household budget to make sure I wasn't overspending. I could see my husband stiffen next to me. This was the point of no return. Before I could respond, he did something that completely caught me off guard. He leaned back in his chair and calmly said, "You know, if you're so concerned about fairness, maybe it's time we had an honest talk about finances. Starting with your living situation." Mil blinked. "What do you mean?" she asked, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. My husband didn't hesitate. He turned to her and said, "The house you've been living in for free. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to her." For a moment, there was stunned silence. Mil's face went pale. She stared at him, eyes wide, then turned to me. Her expression now a mixture of confusion and disbelief. It's not your house," she asked. "No," my husband said firmly. "It's hers. It's always been hers." I watched as the realization hit her. For years, she had been judging me, calling me a leech while living rent-free in my house, never once questioning her own entitlement. I could see her trying to process the information, but it was clear she didn't know how to react. Mil opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She turned to my husband, hoping he would take it back, but he didn't. "Why don't we talk about fairness, then?" I said, leaning forward. "Since you've been so concerned about me contributing, I think it's only fair that you contribute too." Her face drained of color. "What do you mean?" she stammered. "I think it's time you start paying rent," I said calmly. "You've been living here rent-free for years, while criticizing me for supposedly freeloading. If you want fairness, then it's time you pull your weight too." Mil sputtered, but none came. She started making excuses, claiming it was different because she was family, but I didn't let up. "If you want to stay here," I said, "it's only fair that you stop paying rent. You can either pay up or you can find somewhere else to live." Her face twisted as she tried to argue, but she knew she had lost. She was trapped in her own game. My husband didn't intervene. He just watched her struggle to accept the reality she had never seen coming. And just like that, the tables had turned. Mil, who had spent so much time making me feel like a burden, was now the one who had to face the consequences of her actions. Update home. After the confrontation, things were tense, to say the least. Mil tried to backpedal, claiming it was all just a misunderstanding. But there was no going back. She had tried to manipulate me into proving my worth in this marriage. But now she was stuck in her own trap. The best part, she had no idea what to do with herself. She couldn't go back to acting like she was the one in charge. After my husband dropped the bombshell about the house, the next day I could feel the shift. My husband was quiet, almost too quiet. He didn't even bring up the conversation from the night before. But I could tell it was eating at him. He had never stood up to his mother like that before. I wasn't sure whether he was relieved or regretting it. So I decided to give him space to process. He didn't need me to pile on more tension. But I wasn't done. I wanted to be clear with him about why I felt the way I did. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I sat him down. My fingers tapped lightly on the table as I looked him in the eye. "I think we need to talk," I said. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "About what?" "About you and your mother," I replied. "I need to know you're with me on this. No more letting her have a say in our marriage. No more letting her manipulate you." His eyes softened, but I could see the guilt there. "I know, I just didn't realize how much she had been getting to me. I didn't see it." "Well, now you do," I said, giving him a small smile. "And you know, I've been thinking about it. You've been sending her money every month, haven't you?" His face froze, like I had caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" I pulled up the bank statements on my phone and slid them across the table. There were regular transfers to his mother's account. Amounts that didn't seem to add up. He just stared at them, unable to speak. You've been sending her money for what? Because she's your mother. And yet, she has the nerve to call me a freeloader. I asked, raising an eyebrow. I think it's time that stops. He swallowed hard. I didn't think about it like that, he said quietly. Well, now you have to, I said, leaning back in my chair. If I'm going to go back to work, we're going to need that money to help with the kids. You know, since I won't be home all day anymore. So that money is going to a caretaker now, not to her. He looked torn like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just nodded, slowly. You're right. I've been too used to taking care of her. But I see it now. I should have put our family first. I smiled and reached over, squeezing his hand. It's not too late. We're doing this together now. No more enabling her. Datois. The days after that conversation were a roller coaster. Mill wasn't happy, to put it mildly. She started calling, texting, trying every emotional manipulation tactic she could think of. Guilt trips, sob stories about how she had no one else, and how her late husband would have wanted her to be comfortable. I wasn't having any of it. I stayed firm. I told her she had two options, pay rent or find somewhere else to live. She could go back to living off her son's charity, or she could pay her fair share. There was no room for negotiation anymore. When she finally called me to argue, her voice was trembling. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I've been so good to you, and now you're turning your back on me like this. How could you be so cruel? I didn't hesitate. No, you've been good to me by pretending to be the perfect mother-in-law, while undermining me at every turn. You've been living rent-free for years, calling me a freeloader, all while you've bled my husband dry. You're not a victim here. Her response was pure outrage. Of course. I didn't ask to live here for free. I just... Yes, you did. I interrupted. You've been getting free rent, free everything, while I worked my ass off raising your grandchildren, running this house. You're not some helpless widow. You've had enough time to figure this out. So, what's it going to be? There was silence on the other end. I could feel her scrambling, trying to find a way to make me feel guilty. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Update 3. 2 days later, I received a text from my sister-in-law. She wanted to know what had happened. Because apparently, Mill had been crying to the family about how I'd humiliated her. The story was completely twisted, of course. She painted herself as the victim, saying I had forced her out of her own home. I couldn't help but laugh at how she had spun it. I sent back a simple reply. My husband told her the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. That didn't sit well with her family, but I didn't care. They could believe whatever they wanted. I knew the truth. Mill's passive-aggressive messages started pouring in soon after. She was trying to guilt-trip me, calling me cruel and ungrateful. She even said that she didn't have the money to pay rent. That it was unfair for me to expect her to contribute when she was just trying to help her son. I wasn't going to engage with her anymore. I had made my point. I didn't need her approval. If she wanted fairness, she was going to get it. P4. Then the letter came. It was from Mill. Her handwriting was shaky. The words were half-hearted. And the whole thing felt more like an attempt to save face than a real apology. She said she was sorry if she had upset me, but that she was just trying to look out for her son, and that families shouldn't treat each other like this. It was as pathetic as I expected. I read it, folded it up, and threw it in a drawer. That was the end of it. She could apologize all she wanted, but it didn't change anything. The best part, she finally came to terms with paying rent. A few days later, A check arrived for the rent she owed, and I knew it was over. Tad 1, update 5. A few months passed, and I finally took the plunge. I went back to work. Not for Mill, not for anyone else, but for me. It felt good to have my own income again. To know that I wasn't just staying home, but actively contributing to our family in my own way. And you know what? I felt empowered. I wasn't the woman my mother-in-law had painted me to be. I was strong, capable, and I didn't need to justify my place in my own home anymore. As for Camille, she eventually stopped complaining. She kept paying rent begrudgingly. I'm sure, but she stopped trying to sabotage our marriage. She knew she had lost. And now, my husband and I are stronger than ever. We've set boundaries, and we're sticking to them. I'm proud of how far we've come. I don't know if Mill will ever fully accept me, but I'm done trying to prove myself to her. I've got a family to take care of, and no one's going to undermine me again. Looking back, I never imagined that standing up for myself would lead to this kind of change. At the time, I thought I was just defending my place in my own home. But it turned out to be so much more. It was about setting boundaries, taking control, and not letting anyone define my worth. Some people think I went too far. Others think I didn't go far enough. Honestly, I think I did what I had to do. And now, I'm questioning if I could have handled it any other way. So what do you think? Was I wrong for demanding rent from my mother-in-law? Or was she the one in the wrong for trying to manipulate our marriage?